Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends and subscribers, I would like to talk about President Putin in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine and in and around Iran. This is a very complicated issue, and there's lots and lots of information. A lot of it is fake, actually, but there's just constantly the barrage of all kinds of reports on all kinds of details, military, political, economic, that is just bombarded in the internet sources, especially in the social media, not so much in the official media. But what I'd like to do today is to focus on how President Putin handles this complex issue and what are the views in Russia about his leadership. And in general, there is just basically two quite different approaches. One is those that are criticizing him and criticizing him quite severely, as you will see. And the other one is quite positive in terms of his capacity to handle. So in approximate ways, we can title today's presentation as President Putin, a weakling or a master strategist. So the basic questions that have to be answered, and many people are discussing those, is what Putin is up to. Is he actually helping Iran? Is there military aid to Iran? And is there some kind of a secret understanding or a deal with Trump? How to interpret Trump's lifting of oil sanctions against Russia, and how to interpret the adamant rejection of this by the European allies in G7 meeting when Merz called this wrong, when President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer are adamant about blaming Putin and, of course, Trump for allowing Putin violate the sanctions that the Europeans have imposed on Russian oil. So let me start this discussion with the critics of Putin. And I do that by a short introduction where in my book, From Lenin to Putin, A History of Russia, over 100 years, what I do say important about Putin is that he created a coalition which has been holding since the very beginning of his tenure and in the early 2000s. And that coalition was a pro-Westerners, that is to say, liberal intelligentsia and business community that benefited so much from the exposure and openness to the West. So the Westernizers have been very much for Putin. At the same time, this coalition included the nationalists, the communists, and all kinds of other people who were very much troubled by the dissolution of the Soviet Union and who saw in Putin a person who could bring Russia back as a major power. And up to this point, Putin has managed to combine these two, and that is the essence, the hard rock upon which his popularity rested. Now, what is happening now is first indications that the nationalists and the patriots are unhappy, or at least some of them are unhappy, and they are beginning to quite vocally criticize Putin, and that is especially so. It sort of began much more adamant and open in the last 2 weeks since the beginning of the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran. Now, who are these people? Obviously, there's quite a lot of them, and public opinion shows that there's a kind of increase in patriotic nationalist feeling in Russia. A lot of them are generals and analysts and commentators, and very many army officers and soldiers in the field. And you could actually, when you follow the reports on a daily basis from the front lines, you could see that these are kind of very widespread attitudes that basically want a quick victory over Ukraine, and are bothered by this sort of semi-strenuous effort, which obviously is coming from the Kremlin. Now, another point to point out is that it's hard to say how widespread these feelings are, and obviously those people who express them are, in a sense, not serving generals. The generals in the army do not give interviews in Russia. It's just impossible, unthinkable. So the ones who do give, they are mostly retired, or they work in news agencies, or they are so famous that nothing could be done to them for a few critical thoughts. So that's the kind of description of who these people are. Now, as you probably know from my previous videos, I watch Russian media constantly, and they do express themselves in a variety of programs. Now, recently, a few days ago, there was a similar kind of discussion, and General Sivkov, who I quote quite often, he said the following. He said that he expressed his personal opinion, and that is not the opinion of the Academy of the Rocket Forces, and he simply wanted to express his own personal view. And then he just went on a barrage of criticism against the government and President Putin. Specifically, he said that no agreement with President Trump should be pursued. Any agreement with Trump is wrong. He announced publicly, what is he for? He said that Russia should announce publicly that it is in alliance with Iran. It should announce publicly that Russia does and will do anything in its power to provide military assistance and intelligence to Iran. He demanded that any negotiations with Zelensky regime should be stopped immediately. There should not be any talks with Witkoff or Kushner or anybody representing the United States. There should be there should be an end to any talk about improvement of relations with the United States, a country which is supplying intelligence and has been supplying weapons to Ukraine for 4 years. As for Europe, he basically said that Britain and France supply intelligence and Storm Shadow weapons, missiles. And a few days ago, there was a very painful hit on a factory in Bryansk, which is a province right on the borders with Ukraine, and 8 people were killed. And the resonance in Russia was so big that even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia summoned the ambassadors of Great Britain and France and gave them a formal protest. But that's not good enough for Sivkov. He basically said that just as Iran is hitting American bases in the Middle East, from where the attacks on Iran are carried out, Russia should announce to Britain and France that they are participants in the conflict because their weapons are used and they provide storm shadows to Ukraine, and this would not be tolerated. And if they do it again, Russia should hit back at the production facilities of these missiles. In other words, Sivskov's approach is that it should be a much tougher a response than that which was pursued by President Putin. As far as Kirill Dmitriev is concerned, he basically labeled him as a fifth column, and all those who, like him, wish to restore normal relations with Russia and who are missing their properties and their villas in Britain and France, and who would dream to come back to the state of affairs before 2014. So this is the kind of a point of view which Sivkov expressed. Other generals were going in the same directions and saying that that Russia should help Iran with supply of missiles or any other material. They're asking a question: why is the Bandera gang, as they call Zelensky government, still in power? Why the bridges and tunnels going to Poland are still intact and have not been blown up? Why are we tolerating this open, undisguised military assistance by the European Union to Russia, and are even willing to talk to them and sell them oil to the members of NATO instead of shutting down anything? So as you could see, this is a quite sort of a consistent program. It is not just criticism, it is in a sense a political program of how to act in regard to Ukraine and in regard to Iran war. And that raises a question: what is Putin up to? He is aware that these are the views, and yet the negotiations with Witkoff are still continuing, and contacts and a telephone conversation with President Trump took place a few days ago. So that raises a question: what is his strategy? What is his plan? And why is he doing this? Now, the Western media, especially the British, is shouting the loudest that Russia is helping Iran, and obviously their agenda is to bring Trump back into the fold of NATO and back into the fold of supporting Ukraine. And therefore, if he could be demonstrated that Russia is providing intelligence to kill American soldiers, as CNN put it, that would be good enough to convince Trump to going tough on Russia and provide tomahawks or any other things to basically show with U.S. hands and missiles to Putin that the West can hit him and hit him hard. Now, that of course raises the question: do the Russians help Iran? Or do they say that they don't and they don't? Now, the answer was actually provided quite interestingly by one of the observers in one of the shows that I watched. His name is Artamonov, and he is a well-known commentator and observer who explained this way. He said that Russia does not directly provide intelligence to Iran, and it is not supposed to by the terms of the treaty with Iran. However, Russia is in treaty obligations with North Korea, and they are very, very close. North Koreans are fighting for Russia because Russia is is a de facto military confrontation with Ukraine, and North Korea is willing to provide assistance. The same thing goes for Iran. North Korea and Iran are in a close military alliance, and North Korea announced that anything it has is available for North Korea. So, and there are several types of weaponry that the Russians and the Koreans have in common, or that they developed together, or that have been delivered to North Korea, and North Korea is free to deliver it to Iran. Exactly in the same fashion when the British provide Storm Shadows and then they rename it into Flamingo and they say this is a Ukrainian missile that the Ukrainians use themselves without asking permission from the British. Well, by the same logic, Artamonov explained, North Korea may provide Russian missiles or Russian technology or their own missiles based on the Russian ones and then provide it to Iran, and that way help is provided, but Russia is not directly involved, just like the British say they're not directly involved. Now, on the issue of oil, as everybody speaks about this whole world, is that Trump lifted the restrictions on selling Russian oil supposedly for a month. And this is basically a win-win situation because the shortage of oil is already evaluated as a 10 billion losses for the Gulf states and in the world markets. And of course, Trump's idea is that Russian oil can stabilize the prices, and that's what he needs. Now, the Europeans are adamantly against it because they argue correctly that Russia is going to earn $10 billion from that. The same thing actually goes for fertilizers. Russia and Qatar are the biggest producers of fertilizers on the world market. And now that Qatar is out for some time, maybe weeks, maybe months, but the season of agricultural use of fertilizers is coming up very fast, and that's why the price of fertilizers on the world market goes pretty high, and the Russians are the beneficiaries. And there is some conversation in concerning that the Europeans have been trying to extend some contacts to Russian companies to buy the fertilizers, and the Russians responded, no, we are not going to, because there's so much demand in more friendly countries. And Putin said the same thing about oil and gas, that the priority would be to countries that are friendly to Russia, to Brazil, China, India, and African countries. So that seems to be Putin's clever move, to have the cake and eat it too. In other words, he appears to be not directly helping Iran, whereas in fact he is helping Iran, but in a way that the British say that they help Ukraine without direct participation. Same goes for oil, same goes for fertilizers and for other commodities. And also what has become clear for the world to see is that Israel and the United States are spending their missiles so fast, and there's a crisis looming, as military specialists say, of shortage of those, whereas Russia has shown its capacity to produce all kinds of missiles, and they're not running out, despite predictions that they would be. And finally, diplomacy. And this is where I think the heart of the matter is as to why Putin is doing what he's doing, which is a nuanced diplomacy game. And that is based on the fact that Putin is the only one who has a talking and friendly relationship to all the parties to the conflict. Putin is on friendly terms with the Iran leadership. At the same time is on friendly terms with the Gulf states. He maintains friendly contacts with his pal, President Trump, and he maintains open line of communication to Netanyahu and the Israelis. How could that be of importance? Well, very simply, nobody is in that unique position. European Union is split. Spain and Italy openly oppose hostilities and attack on Iran, whereas the North Europeans, especially Britain and France, are eager to jump in, but they don't have any resources to do so. Now, Israel is very tough on words and keeps escalating, but in fact, they know that their dome is failed, that their policy is failed, that their population is frustrated, and their leadership may want one day, maybe soon, to seek a way out of the impasse that Netanyahu drove Israel into. The Gulf states, they have already lost 10 billion, and they are really eager to come back to the way it was before, to get out of the of this between the hard place and the hammer. So they don't want to be in this situation, and Putin is the guy who can talk to them and who can be an intermediary. Now, the Iranians are saying they had nothing to do against the Gulf states. They just want American bases out. And once that is accomplished, they could go back to business as usual. Now, the United States at this moment, as we all know, the rhetoric is still, in high gear. We can destroy this, we can destroy that, we're the biggest, we're the best, unlimited amount of missiles. All this, of course, we all know is empty talk. The United States is running out of missiles. It is not easy to replace them. And the way out would be welcome. It seems like the more time goes on, the more trouble there'll be, and Trump may indeed seek a way out. And who could be a better person to provide this way out as President Putin? Because he can talk to the Iranians, and he can talk to the Gulf states. And what could be the contours of the deal? It's too early to speak about it, but let me just say that if the United States is exhausted, and if Israelis are exhausted, and if the casualties and devastation in Iran reaches a level of unacceptable, and if they are willing to talk, all parties, then Putin is in a unique and exceptional position to be an intermediary and to find a compromise on that would be acceptable to all sides, essentially revolving around nuclear program and security for Iran and for Israel. And so this is it for today, my dear friends. I welcome your comments and I welcome your voting in the questions that I pose once in a while. I invite you to read my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin. And also, if you have time, look at my other playlists on Russian history, on European history, on Russia under Putin and Yeltsin, and on the war in Ukraine. Goodbye.